Long before 2023, when most of the mainstream media coverage surrounding Palestine was full of propaganda, bias, and always leaning towards the Zionist stories, there was an organization online, the Electronic Intifada, providing people with in-depth analysis, revealing the truth about Palestine. And to this day, they have been leading the electronic revolution in support for the Palestinian cause. Today, I am with Ali Abunimah, the director of the Electronic Intifada, to discuss the past, present, and the future. Ali, thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you, Mahmood. It's a pleasure, and I really love your work, and I learned so much from you. So I'm really happy to be with you.
Thank you so much. I've been watching Electronic Intifada for a very long time, and I actually wanted to do this for a very long time, but you and I know very well that the past 2 years have been full of tragic events for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and all of the focus, and rightfully so, went to the people of Gaza. But it's important to let people know about the alternative media nowadays, organizations like the Electronic Intifada, who I believe is leading the forefront and has been for a while in relation to Palestine and all of the work behind it way before October the 7th. And we don't have many organizations or media platforms or electronic platforms who solely focus on Palestine. And what I wanted to go through with you today, Ali, is a little bit of a background. Who is Ali Abunimah and how did he establish the Electronic Intifada?
Well, that's a big question. And I would say the key thing is that, I mean, believe it or not, the Electronic Intifada is now 25 years old, basically, and which probably makes it one of the oldest continuously operating news sites in the world. And I think that's because there is a need for what we do. But over the past 25 years, a lot has changed. I think when we started, there weren't many things like us. Now there is so much good independent media, including channels like yours. I mean, you do an incredible job. I watch you regularly, and I get informed by you. You know, you give facts and you give analysis that are high quality and totally unavailable in the mainstream, which is what we tried to do, and why we started off. And when we started the Electronic Intifada, it was around the year 2000. It was just after the start of the Second Intifada. And at that time, the internet was in its infancy. Independent media of the type we take for granted today was in its infancy. And when we started, mainly what we did was media criticism, because we were all just completely in the bubble of mainstream media, whether it's the BBC or the big American networks or the New York Times. That was your only choice. I mean, other than very marginal print publications, which you had to get by mail and they would come weeks late and so on, there wasn't online media like there is today. So most of what we were doing was media criticism, saying how, you know, responding to the biases, responding to the misinformation. And then at a certain point, we realized, wait a minute, we can start doing our own reporting. We don't need them. So that was really the root of the idea. And sadly, there's still a need for us. I'm looking forward to the day when we can go out of business.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think it's fascinating that the need to have the alternative media is what led you to this. And I think that's what attracts people nowadays as well, because there's so much you can criticize. The criticism falls on deaf ears, and they would be continuing with their project to disinform the population and remain a tool in the hands of the powerful and very, very rich to influence and shape public opinion. And I think that's where our role comes. Like I used to tell people, I said that several times actually. Do you think I wanted to do this initially? I would have rather that you get the picture as it is anyway. But because there is so much information, because we were brought up with so much information, especially as Palestinian people, the level of misinformation, the level of lies, the level of demonization of the Palestinian people goes beyond all boundaries. And that's why I also started to post more videos and more videos regularly. And like yourself, initially I had, and I still do talk about several other subjects too. I diversify, but where the focus needs to be at is where the majority of the injustice lies. And of course, that's in Gaza nowadays and in historical Palestine. But that need keeps motivating us to keep doing more and reveal the truth to the people. And I think it's an obligation, especially for us, knowing that your people have to go through all of that and then get blamed for what they go through. So you said 25 years with the electronic intifada. Many people don't know that Ali Abunimah is from a family of people who were expelled from historical Palestine. Would you mind sharing some of your story, a short story of your family's background and how they had to leave Palestine?
Sure. The two sides of my family really experienced, you could say, the whole range of horrors that Zionism inflicted on all of us, on all our families. My father is from Batir, which is in the West Bank. It's south of Jerusalem. And in 1948, they did actually leave the village under Zionist fire, but the Zionists didn't occupy the village. And they were displaced for a period of months. My dad wrote that story actually for the Electronic Intifada. And it's also published in a book that's edited by Ramzi Baroud and Ilan Pape a couple of years ago. And they fled the village, but it was one of the rare cases where they actually returned to the village after the armistice. And then Batir was occupied again, or occupied in 1967 when the West Bank was occupied. So they lived under Israeli military occupation. To this day, Batir, of course, is under military occupation with the rest of the West Bank. My father was never able to return after 1967. When they occupied the West Bank, the Israelis gave a window for Palestinians to apply for residency cards or to prove their residency. He was outside of Palestine at that time, and he was unable to establish his residency. So even though all his family, his mother, his sisters, all of them were there, he was never able to go back and see them after 1967 in the West Bank. My mother was born in Lifta, which is north of Jerusalem, or sort of northwest Jerusalem. And Lifta was one of the first villages attacked and depopulated by the Zionists, actually beginning in December 1947. It's quite well documented. And from her recollections, she was 10 years old at the time. My mom passed away in September. But she always told us what she remembered of that time. They had to flee the village after the attacks were escalating by the Zionists. And first they fled to another part of Jerusalem, as many people did, and they took shelter with relatives or friends. And then eventually they became refugees in Jordan. And they also never went back. They lost their house, their property, and everything. But Lifta today, what's interesting about it is it's one of the few villages that was depopulated in 1948, which is largely intact. And if you search for Lifta, it's just Lifta. You see pictures of the village, and it's rare to see an intact village from that time. It's uninhabited. The Israelis, of course, don't allow the people to return. There are still survivors from Lifta and their descendants living in occupied East Jerusalem. They visit Lifta during the day. They campaign to preserve it, but they can't go back and live there. And that's interesting because almost every other village that the Zionists depopulated, they destroyed it. They dynamited it so that there would be nowhere to return to. And so Lifta is one of the few remaining examples of, Palestinian village architecture from that time. And actually, about a decade ago, the Zionists had a plan to, do whatever they do. They build some disgusting condos or something. But there was a campaign, and right now they haven't done it. I hope they never will, but I hope we'll see people go back to Lifta and to all the other villages. But that, in a nutshell, is my own family history. Every Palestinian has a version of this history, their own version. And but for me, of course, that's what shaped my early understanding. I wasn't born in Palestine, but you learn that history at a very early age through the experiences of your families. And both of my parents lived through the Nakba, and my dad is a Nakba survivor and still has those memories of living through that time.
Yet all of these stories, and thank you so much for sharing it, yet all of these stories hardly get any coverage. Not the stories of Lifta or the stories of the rest of the hundreds of villages that were destroyed in 1948. To this day, they're expelling people from their homes in Jerusalem and in the West Bank.
The Nakba
They're already
never
destroyed. The Nakba never ended. It just continued. It changed shape and it continued. They're destroying already destroyed rubble in Gaza. In 1948 occupied territories, there is what is called the internal refugees. So, for example, people who were expelled from the villages of Iqrith and Bir'im in the north, for example, in 1948. These villages so some of them still have elements intact, including a church in one of them. Yet, these people had to be forced to other locations within historical Palestine, unlike some who were expelled outside of Palestine in 1948. And it's so important to highlight these stories because the enemies of the Palestinian cause, who are in essence enemies of humanity, the way I view it, they ignore all of this deliberately. They deny it existed, and they buy into the pseudo-narrative that Israel pushed since 1948 to this day. They brainwash their own people with this propaganda, and they brainwash the rest of the population of Earth with it. And it's no surprise that it made an impact on you. And thank you so much for sharing it. You and the Electronic Intifada and your team now are doing a fantastic job. I've been monitoring you way before October the 7th. Like I said, you were a breath of, and are still a breath of fresh air, and will continue hopefully to do so. And you have been one of those few voices who are also bravely covering the action of the Palestinian resistance too, that many people thought did not exist. You see, when they talk about the genocide in Gaza and all of the destruction, they only show the destruction and only talk about what Israel is doing, but they did not ever show what Israel was getting in return. And that was part of their psychological warfare campaign against us. And this is something that made me focus to a very large extent, like yourselves, on the case of the Palestinian resistance and what they do militarily to the Israeli genocide terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip. And of course, you leading the Electronic Intifada, you are also a speaker. You're a public speaker. You travel abroad. People ask you to speak in conferences. One of these conferences or events that you were invited to was in Switzerland. And then, although no one has warned you before, no one told you there's a risk or there's something, all of a sudden you are facing detention in Switzerland. Do you want to tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about that story and what happened there?
Sure, absolutely. But I just want to say about our coverage of the resistance, and particularly the reporting that our colleague John Elmer does on the Electronic Intifada live stream, and all of those videos, his reports for the entire 2 years going back 2 years, is all on the Electronic Intifada YouTube channel. That's incredibly important for the reasons you said. I mean, we are committed to covering what actually happens, particularly covering the aspects that are ignored or overlooked or deliberately covered up. And the resistance is a key part of that, the military resistance. And think about it. You know, the Israelis, how many plans did they announce? We're going to, depopulate Gaza. We're going to control this. We're going to control that. We're going to bring settlers. Why didn't they do any of that? Yes, okay, they destroy, they kill. They're the world champions at that. Nobody disputes that, when it comes to bombing a hospital, Israel is number one in the world. But where are their settlers? Where are their, how many times did they announce, the head of the Israeli military or the defense minister, that we have complete operational control in Beit Hanun, in Gaza City, in Khan Yunis, in Rafah, and they don't. They're still fighting. They don't fight. The resistance fights. That's an incredibly important factor. Now, the Americans are demanding that Hamas disarms. They even passed a whole Security Council resolution about that. But they can't force, they admit, actually, that they can't force the resistance, which is not just the Qassam brigades of Hamas, but all the other factions. They can't force them to disarm. So if people don't understand that basic reality, they don't understand what's happening. They don't understand the dynamics. So that's why we cover it. And the other aspect to cover in terms of the resistance, which I've been writing about and we've been covering for many, many years, is the political aspect, because the resistance and the resistance organizations are so demonized, in the mainstream media as terrorists, as wild-eyed Muslim fanatics, as people who just like to kill because they think killing is fun. All of this racist nonsense, which has nothing to do with reality. These are organizations that are rooted in communities, that have political programs, that have goals, that are politically pragmatic in many ways, actually Hamas, when you think about politically, whether you support it or not, it's very moderate, because their position for the last 20 years basically has been, we want a long-term hudna, a long-term truce with Israel. We're willing to accept a two-state solution. We want to end the violence. We want to become a political organization and run in elections and all of these things. And all of that was rejected and the door closed on them. And so it's our duty to explain that to people, not to say, it's not a factor whether I support it or don't support it. My job as a journalist is to explain the reality. So this is why I want to stress, this is the importance of covering the resistance as a part of this story. Now, regarding, and of course that connects with your next question, that if you fail to demonize the resistance, if you fail to speak about them in racist, crude ways, then you are accused of supporting terror, right? So consequences come with that, and we know that the consequences are more and more censorship, more and more demonization. And I lived all my life in the so-called West, and actually within their limits, we had a great deal of freedom. We had the freedom to speak, to explain, to discuss, actually more than in most Arab countries, to tell you the truth, to be honest about it. That's no longer true. The so-called freedom of speech of the West is basically done, especially in Europe. And what happened to me last January is actually an example of what's happening all over Europe, the UK, Germany, France, Austria, to other well-known independent journalists and activists. But what happened in my case is I was invited to Zurich to speak at two events organized by Swiss organizations, and I traveled there legally. I flew into Zurich. I actually flew from Amman. I was there visiting family, and I entered the country with no problem. You know, they let me in, and then the next day I was with one of my Swiss hosts, and we were walking. It was January, but it was a beautiful sunny day, warmer than usual. Walking to the venue where I'm supposed to give a speech, to give a talk, and to have a question and answer session. Probably, I mean, it wasn't a high profile event where we're going to have thousands of people. It was probably going to be, I don't know, 30, 50 people, just really the committed activists. Honestly, not many people would ever have heard of it. We were walking to the venue on the street, and all of a sudden I feel someone grab me by the neck like this. I have my backpack on. I thought I'm being mugged because we were kind of like in a pedestrian tunnel, just an area that was a little bit covered, I thought I'm being robbed. And then I feel three other people grabbing me, and I'm trying to fight back because I thought I'm being robbed. It's just instinct, I never had this situation like that. It wasn't like, oh, it's just natural instinct. They dragged me, they threw me in an unmarked car, and they sped off. And they left my host. He was standing in the street shocked. And I was like, and they, of course, handcuffed me. And I was like, who are you? What are you doing? What's going on? They're like, we're police. Shut up, we're police. And they took me like to a prison and kept me for 3 days. I was allowed to have a lawyer at the beginning, but after that, I wasn't allowed to speak to a lawyer. I wasn't allowed to speak to family. I had come from Amman. Imagine this, Mahmoud. I'd come from Amman the day before. I'd left my mother. She had just come out of the hospital. She was 87 years old. She'd just come out of the hospital, and I'd been telling her, I've been talking to my dad and saying, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe I should cancel the trip because, mom's situation. Alhamdulillah, she was okay after that particular episode. But at the time we were worried. My dad said, no, go. She's fine. She's home now. Go. It's only a few days. I told them in the prison, I said, listen, I don't want anything from you. Just let me call my mom and check on her. They refused. So
unbelievable.
Yeah. And the weird thing about it that was so strange, the whole thing was totally illegal, and we're actually challenging it now in the Swiss courts. We have several cases in front of them. But the weirdest incident, after I spent the first night in the prison, the next morning they came to the cell, and it was a cell. Metal doors, concrete walls, no communications with the outside world. It was a prison cell. They came to the prison cell. They said, you have a meeting with the police. Like, this was at 8 in the morning. I said to them, what do you mean I have a meeting with the police? I said, does that mean my lawyer is here? They said, we don't know. Our job is just to bring you up. You go up and they'll tell you everything. I said, okay, I'll go with you to see if my lawyer's there, because I'd been asking every time they came to the cell and they brought food. I said, can I talk to my lawyer? They say no. I'd say, okay, take the food. I didn't eat anything while I was there. I said, when you let me talk to my lawyer, I'll take the food. But until then, I learned from our prisoners. Even though I was only there 3 days, I applied their lessons. So they took me, and this was the strange thing, Mahmoud. They took me. We went through all the hallways and all of the cells on every side, and all of a sudden they're being so nice to me. They're taking me into a nice warm office, and there's bottles of San Pellegrino water on the table, and they say, would you like tea? Would you like coffee? I said, no, I don't want anything.
Ooh.
I just want to know, where's my lawyer? Is she here yet? They said, no, she's not here. I said, did you call her? Is she on the way? They said, no, well, actually, what we want to talk to you about has nothing to do with your lawyer. I said, what do you mean? You want to question me without my lawyer? Don't I have a right to have a lawyer present if I'm being questioned? They said, well, this isn't really I said, okay, so what's going on? And there was a guy, an Arabic man, and there was a Swiss man, and they said, and I thought the Arab guy, I thought he's the interpreter. I thought he's the translator, because they said, we have to have a translator legally. And they said, this was when they first arrested me, they said, do you prefer English or Arabic? I said, either is fine. They said, okay, good, because it's the weekend and it's easier for us to find Arabic translators. Why, Mahmoud? Because their prison is full of Arabs. I'm talking about Moroccans, Tunisians, Algerians, North Africa, refugees, asylum seekers. So they have a lot of Arabic translators available. So I met this Arab guy. I thought he's the translator. I shook his hand and I said, you must be the translator. He said, no. Now we'll explain. Sit down. So I sit down and they say, we're from the Swiss Ministry of Defense. I said, what does that have to do with me? They said, well, I learned later that the Swiss intelligence is under the Swiss Ministry of Defense. So actually, they were from the Swiss intelligence. So they said, we're from the Swiss Ministry of Defense, and we just want to talk to you. I said, well, bring my lawyer here, and if she says I can talk to you, then I'll talk to you. But without talking to my lawyer, I'm not going to talk to you. They said, well, no, we just want to see, we want to see if we can help you. And I said, help me with what? They said, well, we just want to see what the problem is. I said, we don't have a problem. I said, we don't have a problem.
The problem is you grabbed me from the street.
I said,
you kidnapped me from the street.
Yeah, you kidnapped me from the street. I'm a political prisoner here, and I don't have a problem. You are the ones who have a problem. So, you want to solve the problem, let me go. They said, well, we just want to see, we want to know what was your reason for coming to Switzerland. I told them, you know why I'm in Switzerland, because I was here to give public talks that were advertised and, anything else. And so, it was just like that. Eventually, I told them, listen, I said, if you don't want to bring my lawyer, take me back to the cell. And that's what happened in the end. But I let loose some language on this Egyptian guy. He was Egyptian from his accent. Egyptian working for the Swiss intelligence. But look at the reason I'm mentioning that is because it just like it's so Israeli what they're doing. They bring an Arab guy and they think, I'm going to be, you're Arabic, you must be my friend, right? You must be a good guy. I'm going to talk to you. But really, I think the whole thing was intimidation and intelligence gathering. And
absolutely.
The abuses, it was 3 days. I can't compare my experience to the experiences that our political prisoners go through in the dungeons and torture camps and rape camps of Israel. Not at all. I don't compare myself to that. But it is a sign of the Israelification of the world, and that these so-called democratic countries, Switzerland, which claims to be the oldest democracy in the world, with referendums on everything. If they're going to put a street sign, they have to have a referendum on it, and so on, are prepared to sacrifice all of their principles, all of their institutions, all of their rule of law to silence their citizens and to silence everyone else about this brutal genocidal entity. Why? What's going on here? How do we understand that? And how do we fight back against it? Because we have to. And that's really what, they're trying to do. They're trying to set an example. So, they pick on me because I'm well known. Richard Medhurst, Eve Engler in Canada, all the people in the UK, the Palestine Action people who are being arrested, and other cases of well-known journalists or activists being arrested because they want to make an example. They want to tell everyone else, you better shut up or this will happen to you. And what I take from it is, no, we actually have to be louder, and we have to be more insistent, because we cannot submit to their terror. We cannot allow terror to work.
I totally agree. I mean, what you described there was fully state-sponsored terrorism. That's a cartel move for you. They didn't even specify who they are. By the way, they're so stupid because they put themselves in danger. If anyone would have attacked, you said you started to try and defend yourself. If you had hit one of them or something happened because they're not telling you they're police or whatever, they could have ended up in trouble. And the way they kidnap people, and you nailed it when you said it's to intimidate people, that's state-sponsored terrorism. To kidnap someone, not even tell him that you're detained without identification. You're pulling someone in a van.
Well, they did identify themselves, after I don't know how long. It's hard to judge at the time. But at the initial point, I thought they was being robbed. But the key thing, Mahmoud, this is a recent development, because again, we have these cases in the courts in Switzerland. I hope that we will be vindicated. To me, it's important to fight back, because also Switzerland is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. So this has, these are legal precedents that are relevant in a lot of countries. But there was a parliamentary inquiry in Switzerland into what happened to me that published its report earlier this month. And they found, we knew already, just to make it very short, what came out already as part of the papers we got in the court cases, because they have to give us, the documents and so on, is that initially, when the Zurich police asked the Swiss federal government, they asked the Swiss national government, they said, this guy, Ali Abunimah, is coming to Switzerland. We want to have an entry ban on him. We want to stop him from entering Switzerland and speaking. The Swiss federal government, their federal police called Fedpol, refused. They said, we looked at what you sent us. We looked at this guy. We consulted the Swiss intelligence. This was before I arrived. We consulted the Swiss immigration authorities, and there is, and his speech is covered by freedom of expression, and there is no threat to Swiss security from him. So they rejected the request from Zurich to ban me. So I entered Switzerland legally. They had already rejected the ban. After I entered, they imposed a ban. We found out recently from the parliamentary report what happened, which is that the head of the Swiss federal police, Fedpol at the time, a woman called Nicoletta Della Valle, phoned, she is the director of Fedpol, she called the director of the division that was responsible and overruled his decision. He said, there's no grounds to ban Ali Abunimah. She told him, I'm overruling you, you ban him. And the parliamentary report says that her actions were totally improper, and that there was no basis to do that. There was no new information. There's nothing in the records about why. There's no documentation to say, okay, first we denied the ban, but then we received this new information, so a decision was taken to impose it. Nothing in the file, just her phone call. This is the kind of stuff we hear about in like dictatorships, that the big guy calls and says, you do what I say. The interesting thing about Nicoletta Della Valle is that a few months after that, she retired. And what did she do after she retired? She got a very high-paying job with an Israeli investment company called Champel Capital.
There we go.
Which is founded by like a genocidal Israeli guy called Amir Whiteman, who believes that, everyone in Gaza is a terrorist who should be killed. And Champel Capital, one of its main areas of investment is the Israeli arms industry and military industry.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
So this is what we're trying to expose. It's not about me. What happened to me is just a window in this dystopic world we're living in.
100%. I was actually about to ask, what's the Israeli connection? And there you have it again. And she has many examples in other European countries, examples in Britain, examples. And when we want to talk about the examples, that's the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. The examples in the United States of America. I mean, you might as well call it Greater Israel, isn't it?
It's Israelification, yeah.
The United States has the strongest Israeli lobbies. They have always sided with Israel, and many of the, if not all, mainstream media, many people who consider themselves to be alternative media, were also siding with Israel, with organizations in online in the United States, such as the Daily Wire and all of these organizations funded by Zionists, whether on the right or the left side of the map. In the past 2 years, the public opinion has been shifting, and more people are being more critical of Israel in a more brave and outright way, as in it's not open for interpretations and there is no going back. And again, what does the federal government do? They introduce more measures under this falsely labeled anti-Semitism claim and all sorts of other excuses to shut free speech. They already had that with the Patriot Act, and now they're trying to expand it with the Palestinian case, crackdown on universities, on students, deporting people who support the Palestinian cause only because they are speaking what they think. Freedom of speech, like the fact that you had to go through that in a European country, shows you what they are about and what their values, their supposed values are, at least when it comes to Israel. Everything stops when it comes to Israel. They will cross every line. They will act like a cartel, like a genocidal cartel, like the mafia, against people who start to speak about Palestine. And the reason that I wanted to go through the United States, of course, is that, of course, you guys are in the United States, and there is a lot of activism in the United States on multiple fronts too. There have been attempts of crackdown. Now, of course, I don't want to go into all of the details of the crackdown, what the government has done. Anyone who observed, will see some of these policies of the United States federal government, but they were also part of the intimidation and state-sponsored terrorism. I like to call it as a state-sponsored terrorism against citizens who practice free speech. And some people were asked to depart, as in they wanted to deport them. Some people were imprisoned, again, unlawfully kidnapped in the streets, like the case of Mahmoud Khalil. Where do you see this going? I mean, the Zionist lobby is going wild in the United States now. They're trying everything. They're not hiding anything anymore. They're outright admitting we're paying influencers $7,000 a post. Larry Ellison is buying TikTok, they're getting more control over mainstream media, and they're trying really hard, not only in America, but in other parts too, with some of these figures that they prep, fund, and all of a sudden they're an influencer. Hey, presto, they're an influencer all of a sudden because of something. And they're heavily backed and funded. They try through them to push for the Zionist narrative. Where do you see this going? Do you think they will be effective? Do you think that the federal government crackdown will succeed in suppressing the speech? Or have we reached a point of no return, at least when it concerns Israel and Palestine?
I think we've reached a point of no return. I really do. You know, I've been in the United States for more than 30 years, and the sea change in public opinion is something I've never seen. For the first time now, you have consistent majorities of all Americans saying that they don't support Israel, saying that they oppose military and economic aid to Israel. This is unprecedented. And then when you break it down to sort of subsections of the population, you have huge majorities in support of Palestine and Palestinian rights and hostile to Israel. So when you take people who are under 30, when you take, people of color, when you take people who vote for the Democratic Party, I'm not talking about the Democratic Party leadership. It's a different matter completely. I'm talking about the grassroots, the voters. You know, support for Israel is now in the single digits. And the younger you go, the stronger the support for Palestine. And this is causing a real crisis for the Israel lobby. We've seen that time and again. They're having these freakouts saying that, oh, it's because of TikTok, oh, it's because of social media, oh, it's because of this, because of that. And they don't have a solution. And they've been throwing tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at this quote unquote problem now for years. And steady erosion. You know, long before October 7th, they were trying to fight the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And they were saying, you know, if we don't stop this on campuses in a few years' time, then, you know, all these students on campuses who are exposed to this, what they call anti-Israel hate. Of course, this anti-Semitism, this anti-Israel hate, but it's just advocacy for Palestinian rights. Well, they're going to be in leadership positions. They're going to be in Congress. They're going to be, and lo and behold, I mean, I'll tell you an incredible story. In 2013, so we're talking 12 years ago, I was invited to give a talk at Bowdoin College in Maine. It's in the Northeast United States. And at that time, I was talking at a lot of colleges. And the head of the Students for Justice in Palestine group wrote to me. He said, would you like to come to Maine? And I went. You know, I did a tour of colleges in that area in the Northeast United States. And guess who the student was who invited me, who was the head of the Students for Justice in Palestine at Bowdoin College, who hosted me there. Well, he's a student you may have heard of. His name was Zohran K. Mamdani.
Okay.
So,
of course,
I mean,
now he's the mayor of New York.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's that was literally the nightmare of the Zionists. They were saying, you know, these students, if we don't stop this movement on campus, these students are going to be in leadership positions in 10 years' time. And this is exactly what's happening. And yeah, we can argue about, is Zohran Mamdani, is he being too compromising now, or is he doing? That's besides the point. That's not the point I'm making here. Not talking about him as an individual. The point I'm making is that he grew up with this understanding of the situation in Palestine. That's very real. It's very deep. He didn't just adopt that position. And there are many others like him. And I'll give you another example. The amount of money, and you know this, and effort they put into spreading the lies about October 7th, particularly the claims about mass rapes on October 7th. And they put huge effort into this. They had that big movie with Sheryl Sandberg, the billionaire from Facebook, screams before silence. They had the stories in the New York Times. They had campus tours. They had, Hillary Clinton was doing events on, the poor women who were raped on October 7th. And the mainstream media all ran with this story. None of them questioned it to this day. But because of independent media, a few outlets, I mean, definitely the Electronic Intifada is one of them, but we weren't the only ones. There were reporters, by the way, within 48. There was a collective there that very early on did really good reporting, but they do it anonymously because of the repression that's there. They do it under a pseudonym, I should say. Mondoweiss, The Grey Zone, the Electronic Intifada. We're totally exposed. This is a lie. To this day, there isn't one single identified victim, living or dead, of a rape on October 7th. Not one. It's a total fiction. And this propaganda failed. People don't believe it. Young people don't believe it. And the reason they thought that propaganda would work is because, young people, they're very sympathetic, as they should be, to women's rights, and they are very sensitive about issues of sexual violence and assault, which we should all, of course, be aware of. And so they wanted to exploit that sensitivity to position Israeli women as victims of brutal, wild beast Arab men who come in and rape. Nobody buys it. Nobody bought that narrative. And one of the top propagandists for this, an Israeli woman called Ruth Halpern Kadari, she used to work with the Prime Minister's office and, with all of these genocidal Israeli universities that are deeply complicit in the genocide, but she masquerades as, an expert on women's rights. And she's been going around the world giving lectures and say, the poor Israeli women who are raped, even though there isn't a single, not one testimony, not one. Remember, they're not saying that the rape on October 7th was, just a few cases. They're saying it was a systematic campaign ordered by the leadership of Hamas, that the Hamas fighters were given instruction manuals of how to rape Israeli women, and they were sent to. But in the year 2023, where every single person is carrying a high-power video camera with them, not one video, not one photo of a rape taking place, not one. I mean, it's not something I'd ever want to see. But the UN said, we never found such a video. We never found a photo. And she was in, we saw the video. She was at the London School of Economics a few weeks ago giving a lecture. And on the screen on her PowerPoint, she has all the headlines from the Electronic Intifada saying, they're rape denialists. They're, denialism. But she didn't, I wish she had gone through the articles and said,
rape
this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is. She couldn't point to a single thing we said wrong. And the same with the same with the Hannibal Directive, because their story of October 7th again is, Hamas came in and they murdered. People. It was horrible that some civilians were killed on October 7th, but that's different from the reality that civilians were not. The October 7th was an operation against the Israeli military. Yes, people were killed. There were not orders. We had the testimonies in the Israeli media. Okay. For example, from Yasmin Porat. She was a survivor, an Israeli woman who survived what happened in Kibbutz Be'eri. She was in the Nova Party, and then she fled from the Nova Party with her boyfriend to Kibbutz Be'eri, which is a few kilometers away, and they took shelter in a house of a woman called Pessi Cohen, an Israeli woman in the kibbutz. There are, settlers there, 1-2 kilometers from the border of Gaza. Yasmin Porat survived. She was one of two survivors of what happened there who lived to tell the tale. And she went on the Israeli national radio on Kan, the national network, on October 15th. So we're talking about a week later. in Hebrew on the morning program, like which everyone in Israel hears when they're driving to work. And they asked her, well, what happened? She said, well, very briefly, you know, this happened. I was in the house. They asked her, well, did the terrorists kill people? Did they hurt people? She said, no, they didn't kill anyone. They were very nice to us. What do you mean? She said, well, they told us we're not going to hurt you. Everything's going to be fine. You know, we want our people to be freed. So we're going to take you and then we'll free you. I mean, they were very naive, it seems. We're going to free you and they're going to free our people. And the whole thing will be over in a day. We're not going to kill you. Don't worry. Calm down. She said they gave us food. They gave us water. They told us, don't worry. Then at a certain point, one of the fighters, he decided to surrender. And he got on the phone with the Israeli police or whoever was outside, and they told him, come out with one of the Israelis. She was on the phone interpreting for the police. They said, come out to the Yasmin Porat. Come out with her. So she escaped from the house where there were the Palestinians and a bunch of Israeli captives, civilian settlers from this kibbutz. She got out of the house, and then sometime after that, the same day, the Israeli military shelled the house and killed everyone inside. The Israelis, the Palestinians, everyone. Children, everyone. This was in Kibbutz Be'eri, the house of Pessi Cohen. If she hadn't got out, nobody would know what happened there. She told the story and then there was one other survivor, a woman who survived the shelling. She was badly injured, and she also confirmed that. And then we found out that actually this happened all over the south, all over. The Israeli military was going up with Apache helicopters that were emptying their ammunition and going back and reloading, firing at all the you just had to look at the pictures. Like, how is Hamas going to burn hundreds of cars using AK-47s? How are they going to destroy whole streets of houses in kibbutzes, whole houses leveled to the ground like you see in Gaza with AK-47s, even if they had a few rocket-propelled grenades? It's impossible. Nobody in the mainstream media, no one in the New York Times and the BBC and CNN, nobody asked these questions. Nobody looked at it logically. Then, you know, what we found, we were able to report all of this just by using first common sense. You look at the picture and you say, okay, wait, how did like a few guys with AK-47s destroy an entire street in Kibbutz Be'eri? How? With what? Number one. Number two, read the Israeli media. Actually, all of this was in the Israeli media, with all the censorship, with all the racism, with all the bigotry, with all the propaganda in the Israeli media. You find more truth about what happened on October 7th in Yedi'at Ahronot, in Haaretz, in Kan, on Channel 12, than you do in all of the Western media combined. Because they want to talk about it. And the other thing is the Israelis believe, I mean, this is something I discovered about them a long time ago. They think Hebrew is a secret code. You know, they think anything you say, they say to each other in Hebrew, no one in the world will ever hear it. So they speak much more freely in the Israeli media in Hebrew about the reality than they do speak to the outside world. So what I'm saying is that we were able, a lot of what we did, okay, yes, I don't want to diminish, we actually worked hard and the other independent media worked hard, but sometimes it's as simple as just translating what's in the Israeli media.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I was doing that actually from the beginning. And one of the other examples was Yocheved Lifshitz, who was released on humanitarian purposes from the thingy, from the Palestinian resistance. And they weren't expecting what she was about to say, right? That's why we get that truth sometimes
she
from
was
them.
The
because not
elderly
everything...
woman who was released in the first truce in November 2023.
Israel didn't want to accept her. Hamas told them, we want to release her for humanitarian reasons. Israel didn't want to accept her. Then they had to send her to Egypt alongside another elderly woman. Then they went out, and then the bombshell happened when they started to say that Israel targeted them 3 times to kill them. Miraculously, they survived. An injured Palestinian resistance fighter was treating them and protecting them. That they were very kind to them. That they were very respectful of them. They were giving them everything that they need in terms of food and hygiene and medical care. Respectful for women's needs too. That's what she said in her press conference, that Israel later called a Hasbara bombshell against us. Why? Because simply she said the truth, and they don't want people to say the truth. And the Western population, of course, they didn't have any of that. Unfortunately, even some of these basic things that you get, like you said, when they're comfortable and talking to each other, and they start to say that, yeah, every child is an enemy, for example, and we need to wipe all of Gaza, level all of Gaza with everyone in it.
Disabled the translate from Hebrew button.
There we go. Yeah. Of course, because it only takes to know what they're talking about. And I agree with you. That we have reached a point of no return. One thing that I would want to wrap up with you, Ali, is that you have a vision that I share with you of a one-state solution in Palestine. Can you tell us why is it that you believe in a one-state solution in Palestine, and how would it look?
That's a really good question, because I wrote a book on that, like now, not quite 20 years ago, I guess 2007, I think, One Country, setting out a vision, and being inspired by the end of apartheid in South Africa, and saying, we can live in peace, with equality, with equal rights, with respect for each other's languages, religions, etc. I mean, that's the kind of world I want to live in. This is a world with thousands of languages, thousands of religions, thousands of ways of life. One group can't impose its way of life on the others. I want to live in a world where everybody can live, can speak their language, can educate their children, and live in peace. It's honestly all I want. And I believe that's a vision that most Palestinians would embrace. And perhaps naively, I believed that by starting that discussion with this book, of course, I'm not the first one. There's a long history of this idea. But
absolutely, of course.
When I wrote this book, there wasn't much discussion about it at that time, and everyone was talking about the two-state solution. And I thought, let's start this discussion. And there were also other initiatives at that time that brought this discussion back. And post this genocide, I asked myself, do I still believe in that vision? Can we still talk about such a thing after this genocide, after seeing what Israel is and what the Israeli people are? Because, and that's a hard thing to say. I'm not saying every single Israeli is a genocidal person, is a bad person, or supports this, that there are no Israelis who dissent. There are some, but the vast majority went along, and hundreds of thousands participated in the genocide. We're not talking about a small number. So, in principle, yes, I still support this idea, because what else could there be? I don't believe in genocide. I wrote in the book, actually, it's either genocide or equality. And they chose, I thought we can persuade them equality is the better solution. And they said, no, we prefer genocide. And I explain in the book how I think we could get that. I think it's very different now. It's a much harder discussion to have, because we're talking about an entity that is still now, the Holocaust in Gaza isn't finished. The Holocaust in the West Bank, the genocide of the West Bank is accelerating. The repression of Palestinians in 1948 is accelerating. But ultimately, I see a decolonized Palestine from the river to the sea, with equal rights for everyone, with respect and protection for every religion, every language, every tradition. Yes, absolutely. The question is not will we accept it? I think the question has always been, will they accept it? And there you have to look at the broader history of settler colonialism, which is that the settlers almost never accept equality. You know, the French settlers in Algeria, the revolution in Algeria said, you can stay, but as equals, you can stay. The French said, no way will we accept equality with you, dirty Arabs. And they went back to France. The same with the Portuguese in Mozambique. The same with a lot of white South Africans, about 1 million left after apartheid. They said, if we can't live in South Africa as kings, then we leave. We go to Australia, we go to Canada, we go to New Zealand. So the question has never been about us. The question is, can they accept equality? And what we've seen during this genocide is a country that is has no limits to the fanaticism and extremism. If that can ever change, if there can be accountability, if they can reckon with what they've done and bring to justice those responsible, then yes, it's a possibility. We can't let go of that vision, because what's the alternative? But I'm just saying it's a much harder discussion now. But we can't let go.
It's a much harder discussion, and I will add to that from my perspective, because I also share the same vision of a one democratic or one state solution with equal rights, whatever you call it. I think that this is inevitably going to be the ultimate solution eventually, and they will be fleeing. Many of them will be fleeing, but it will not happen up until there is one of the two. Number one, they get totally neglected by the world, as in the United States and other countries will stop the military tap. Number two, an all-out military confrontation that would even include US military support that will eventually be defeated, because we have seen that happening in recent history. And then we can talk about, that's it, dismantle Zionism, this apartheid ideology, and implement equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea. This is how I view it and how it's going to end.
Yeah, and that's something that has to be said explicitly, is Zionism is this racist genocidal ideology. The Israeli population has to be de-Zionized, just as the Germans had to be denazified, although I don't think it's been that successful, sadly.
That didn't work properly.
Well, we have to learn the lesson. We have to do better. But that's the point, is that I believe fundamentally that humans can live together. And as monstrous as Israel's behavior is, as monstrous as the regime is, Israelis are still humans. And I don't say that to say, oh, you know, all peace and cotton candy, but humans are capable of almost any evil, and they're also capable of living in a civilized way. So I have to hold on to that hope that they can find their way back to some kind of civilized life, in which case they'll have a future. But yeah, I share the vision that you just laid out, Mahmood, and I think the time will come where we have to start having that discussion again.
Absolutely. Ali, it has been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for your valued input and very, very interesting observations. I'd like to thank you very much for all of my viewers and listeners. If you don't already follow the Electronic Intifada, and I'm sure many of you would already be following the Electronic Intifada, I will be sharing all of the links for Ali and the Electronic Intifada below, so please make sure to go and give them a follow. Ali, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll hopefully do it again.
I hope so. And thank you, Mahmood, for your really fantastic work. I am a regular viewer and a huge fan. So I was really honored when you asked me to come on your program.
Appreciate that. Okay, everyone, that's it for this show. And we will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.